Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to Fennsomnia. And I must say, it's actually probably morning for some of you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I had to put kind of a mute on my other one because I had the secondary YouTube popping up, so I kind of muted it. So hopefully everybody can hear me. If you can hear me okay, just give me a little nod in the chat room or something. So again, I just want to welcome everyone to Fennsomnia. I know it's evening for some of you, and those of you that are viewing on the East Coast, I know we've got a few of you in the chat room already. I want to say good morning to you. And this is your, if you've got Fenn on the brain and you can't sleep, this is the show for you because we're up late at night. So just want to put out a couple administrative things, guys. I'm here tonight with the kids. The wife is working tonight, so if for some reason one of my two young ones gets up, I'm obviously going to take care of them, and we'll just allow you guys to chat in the chat room. So just want to let everybody know tonight I do have a couple of topics that I want to go over, and that being the word brown in the poem and why it is capitalized. And I also want to talk about secondhand information. Over the last couple of after parties that we've had, there's been a lot of secondhand information. I want to talk a little bit about secondhand information and how, I think that we should be looking at that and how that it can also influence you. So those are kind of the topics I want to talk about tonight. But in that, I want to make sure that most of you probably have your Thrill of the Chase book handy. I will be referring to that tonight and kind of asking you to go to a couple pages. So if you don't have that handy or somewhat, you might want to grab that because I will be referring to that. And if you've got it memorized, then don't worry about it. And if you don't want to go to it, that's fine too. But I will be talking about some specific things out of the Thrill of the Chase. Yes, the poem purist will be going to the Thrill of the Chase, but it's just kind of giving you a little bit of reference to what we're going to be talking about. So I just want to, first of all, want to recognize a few people in the chat room tonight. It looks like Man in the Barn was the first person in the room, so I like to call him the front running bastard. But there's obviously been chat going on here for the last hour. You guys have been chatting up in there, but I want to say hi to Rob G, obviously Man in the Barn. William out there, I know he's on the East Coast there. So William, good morning to you. Jimmy Fast, Jimmy, how are you? Journeyman, Sean Martinez, how are you, Sean? Sledneck, hey Sled. Finding the Chest. Anon. Rob G, ES, I think that's Eric. Olaf on the River. And that's pretty much everybody. JC, how are you? That's Maverick Searcher. Rodney Greenway, hey Rodney, how are you? William, yes, solo tonight. Denise Bagley, how are you, Denise? Jim White. Fenn Treasure Hunter, Jason, how are you? Wig Reeves. Minotaur Marino, Jason or Justin, good to see you. Jason Eunice, hey Jason, how are you? Didn't see you pop in there. Misha Chapman. And Lori James, hey Lori, how are you? So that kind of wraps up those that are communicating in the chat room. Just want to say hi to you guys and glad that you've joined us tonight for this episode of Fennsomnia. So I'm just going to get right into it. I said I wanted to talk about brown and why it's capitalized. But, I've noticed a little bit on some of the forums, a lot of people say I don't really talk much about, my answers to the clues, or I kind of repeat myself a lot. And I'm gonna be honest, they're absolutely right. I don't talk about my answers to the clues, and I do repeat a lot of the things that that I consistently say. And I think I said this in one of my videos where I talked about, I don't want to, mislead people by giving you my answers, because I can't prove that those answers are correct. And why would I continually muddy the waters with more information? Because I think that there's just way too much noise out there as it is. So yeah, I even going back to my first video that I put out, the one that, I'm kind of got my back facing to the video, and it's all about me, about, I'm a Fenn treasure hunter. I stated in the very end of that video that this whole video log series, or me doing this YouTube channel, I really wasn't going to talk about my answers, but I was going to talk more about methodologies and kind of, try and provide those in the community just some different methodologies that I employ. And one of those that I've been open and honest about is that I believe, as a poem purist, that grammar, word meaning, punctuation stuff are very key. So everything that I talk about and some of the things that I talk about revolve around grammar, word meaning, and punctuation. So I've been very open to everybody that that's it. And that is something that we all have in common. We all speak the English language, and we all have that in common. It's, we've all, in grammar school or elementary school, we learned grammar and we learned English and those types of things. But as we get older, we tend to believe we know what all our words mean. We understand what they mean, but I think that we really don't. And Forrest Fenn has kind of alluded in that in some of his videos. If you go back to like the Moby Dickens video, he's kind of alluded to that. So yeah, I don't really share my answers or talk about it. Heck, I don't even tell you what search state David and I are searching in. So yeah, I don't really go into my answers, guys, but I do like to talk about methodologies. I do talk about grammar. And tonight I will be delving into that a little bit. So everything that I talk about tonight, is just my opinion. Again, I cannot prove that grammar is key to solving this thing. It's just how I interpret it, just how others interpret it through very imaginative ways, and that's fine too. We cannot prove that the over-imaginary way is not the right way. We can't prove that the very logical way of just grammar is the right way, but it's the method that I employ, and I'm going to kind of delve into that a little bit tonight when we talk about, why is Brown capitalized within the poem. So why is the word Brown capitalized? So let's just delve really quick into the rules of capitalization. And there's a few rules of capitalization, but let's, most people will say that capitalization, the rules of capitalization do not matter in this poem. And most of that is because of a single, Q&A that came from Forrest. Let's see if I can bring up did I just cut it out? Give me a second, guys. Uh-oh. I lost something here. Can't bring it up. Where did it go? That's weird. Haven't had that happen before. That's a new one. There it is. Okay, guys. I got lost something there. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here really quick. Okay, hopefully you guys can see my screen. I got my stuff situated here. But this is a featured Q&A with Forrest, and this came out in April 21st of 2015. And the Q&A was, Mr. Fenn, have the rules of capitalization been properly followed throughout the entire poem? And this was from somebody named Chicago Dave. And Forrest Fenn answered with a capital whose, capital rules, comma, Chicago Dave, question mark, and then the F. Now, most people look at this, and every time we talk about Brown being capitalized and being something, then everybody goes, well, he doesn't follow the rules of grammar, or he doesn't follow the rules of capitalization because of this one thing. Now, I'm not saying everybody, and I know I use that word a lot, and people, beat me up about that, and rightfully so. Not everybody doesn't believe in the capitalization rules, but a lot of people that will try and negate rules of capitalization or punctuation or grammar will cite something like this and go, well, he's simply saying whose rules, as though he doesn't follow those rules. Again, this is kind of, in my opinion, one of those typical Fenn, using our own words against us or playing with us, kind of a non-answer. But you've got a guy here, Chicago Dave, who has, Chicago capitalized, like probably it should be, and then his name, Dave, with no space in between them. So he's like, okay, in my opinion, I read this and I go, okay, Chicago Dave, are we supposed to go by your rules of capitalization and punctuation and grammar? Whose rules are we playing by here? So it's kind of like a little bit of wordplay with Forrest. So I look at that and I just kind of brush it off that I think Forrest is just kind of playing with this guy. So I'm going to look at that, and those that say, well, he's not following the rules of capitalization, I'm going to go, well, I believe he is. So it's just a matter of how you look at it. So, okay, hopefully I'm done here sharing my screen. So now let's talk about rules of capitalization. Now there's about 4 kind of rules of why we capitalize words. And I'm only going to talk about 2 of them because I believe that these 2 are the most pertinent. Now you can look these up on your own, and I highly suggest, don't take just my word for this. Go look these things up on your own. But the first rule that pretty much everybody knows and understands is that you always capitalize the first word of a sentence. That's pretty elementary. Everybody knows that. So at the beginning of every sentence, you capitalize that first word, no matter what the word is. Okay. The second rule is if that word is a proper noun. Okay. Now let's go back to that first rule. Sorry, I should have stated this. That first rule, at the beginning of a sentence, you have to capitalize it. Now we know that the word brown in the poem is not at the beginning of a sentence, right? So it doesn't follow that rule. We know that. That's pretty obvious. But then the second rule of why we capitalize words is if that word is a proper noun. Now, this is where I believe why brown is capitalized falls into, because it potentially could be a proper noun. But let's talk about, there's 2 different types of nouns. Okay, and we all know a noun is what? A person, place, or thing, right? Elementary. This is 6th grade, English stuff here. Guys, I will look at your questions. I just want to get through this portion of it. Then we'll kind of have like a little Q&A, and then before I move on to the second topic. But we all know a noun is a person, place, or thing. But there are 2 different types of nouns. There are what you call common nouns, and then there are what you call proper nouns. Now, a common noun is generally a generic noun, whereas a proper noun is a unique or very specific noun. Okay, let me give you just an example. The word man is a common noun because there are 3-4 billion men on the planet, so to speak, right? So it's common. It's a common noun. It's very generic. But Forrest Fenn is a unique person. Okay, he is a one of a kind. Okay, so while the word man in a sentence won't be capitalized because it is a generic or a common noun, Forrest Fenn is a unique, specific person, so you capitalize it. Okay, so now this is I kind of want to give you guys an example of this. And I told you we're going to go to the book, right? And Forrest Fenn, I think, gives us a little bit of an example of this. And we talk about, this last, after party we had, where we had gone to the whole thing that brown trout is not, or brown is not in reference to brown trout. And we went into this whole thing about, somebody getting or meeting with Forrest and them telling him that brown had nothing to do with brown trout. Well, that wasn't how that whole scenario went down. And I kind of explained that, Wednesday, and the fact that, this person was having, and I tracked this person down and talked to this person directly about this, incident. And this person had told me, no, that's not how it went down. They were explaining part of their solve. And when they got to explaining what their home of brown was, and then talking about how it was a confluence of rivers, and that being a very popular brown trout fishing area, and Forrest Fenn was shaking his head no. Now, that person automatically made the assumption that then, the home of brown or brown in itself had nothing to do with brown trout. Well, that's not necessarily how he was doing that. And that's how we can get into secondhand information later. But I'm just giving you guys a little bit of background on this. So let me explain to you a little bit about why, brown trout, just using grammar, or the word brown has nothing to do with brown trout, because trout is a noun. It is a common noun. And even brown trout is still a common noun. Now, if I was to go fishing with my kids and I was to catch a brown trout, a singular brown trout. I was to bring it home. We were put it in our bathtub, and my kids were looking at it, and they decided to name it Brownie. Well, now that brown trout has a name. His name is Brownie. Well, if I was to write a letter to our grandparents to tell them this whole story, I would capitalize Brownie, because now it is a unique brown trout. Even though it's going to be a dead one on my dinner plate, it is a unique one because we gave that brown trout a name. Now it is a specific, unique brown trout. It is not, in the river with all of its buddy brown trouts. But I want everybody, if you can, and just, humor me here a little bit, but turn to page 38 in your Thrill of the Chase book. And I'll give you guys a minute to do that. I am drinking water tonight, guys. Cheers. Again, like I said, I have the kids tonight, so if there was anything, I need to be able to take care of them and drive them somewhere if I need to. So we should be on page 38, obviously the chapter Surviving Myself, and I want you to go down to the second paragraph where it starts off with stating scissor tails were smaller. Now, that scissor tail is a type of bird. Okay, it's the bird of paradise, or the bird of paradise of Texas, or something along those lines. But it is a type of bird, right? Scissor tails. But because if you follow, the first rule of capitalization, because it is at the beginning of a sentence, it is capitalized. Okay. Now, if you go further down into this chapter, I think it's down towards the bottom. He says here, I figured they wouldn't know the difference, but Mom and Dad sure would. And I didn't want it because scissor tails ate some pretty disgusting things. Now, if you notice in here, scissor tails is no longer capitalized. Now, why is it? Okay, if we think brown trout is supposed to be capitalized because of B, and you're believing that, then why isn't scissor tails in here capitalized? Well, Sean, it was capitalized in the beginning of a sentence. Well, yes, because we're following that first rule of capitalization. You have to, at the beginning of a sentence, capitalize it. But in here, it's not. Why? Because it is a common noun. It is not a proper noun. It is just a generic bird. It is a subspecies of bird, but it is still a common noun and a generic bird. If you were to name that bird Mr. Scissors, then yes, you would name it, we're going to eat Mr. Scissors. That's just the difference between a common and a proper noun. So brown, in my opinion, is a proper noun. And as a proper noun, it can only be a very specific person, place, or thing. And in my opinion, it is not referring to a thing. It's either a person or a place. And that is where I was trying to get into a little bit on Wednesday night with DeCall, because DeCall, still, no matter what I tell him, he's going to be on brown trout, and that's fine. Again, I believe and I follow the rules of grammar and punctuation and word meanings going through this. So for me, when I look at that and why it's capitalized, I look at that specific reason why. It has to be a proper noun, because it's capitalized at the end of a sentence, not at the beginning of a sentence. So it has to be, to me, a person, place, or thing, but a very specific and unique, person, place, or thing. One individual one. It's no different than a common word, city. And there's many cities in the United States, but Farmington, New Mexico is a very unique place. So you capitalize that with a capital F, but city in a sentence, you don't capitalize city because it is a common noun. Okay. And you can go on about that. Now I'm just going to go really quick into the chat room and just see what everybody's chatting about here before we kind of move on to the next topic. Hopefully everybody's doing good tonight. Marty Bird says, does Forrest follow the rules of grammar in the rest of the book? And and going through the book, and I've read it many times as most of everybody else, I believe he does follow the rules of grammar. You know, he does do some misspellings, and he does say some things that we know to be wrong. That doesn't really follow grammar, but looking in the book again, I'm more about the poem. I'm focusing more on the poem because that is the pure evidence. And yes, it's in a poetic structure, and I believe that he's put it in a poetic structure to mask that which is to unravel it, in my opinion. But I believe he does, to the best of my knowledge, follow the rules of punctuation and grammar throughout the book. Got like helicopters flying over the house to the neighborhood tonight. I don't know what's going on. I haven't heard anything bad, but I keep hearing them flying over if they're doing some training or what. It's pretty late for them to be doing that. Again, I don't expect everybody to you know to fall in line with my kind of thinking. You know, there's a lot of people that don't believe that grammar or punctuation is important because of certain words or their interpretations of certain clarifications that come from Forrest, and that's fine. You know, I'm not here to try and change anybody's mind. I'm just giving out my opinions. Again, I am no authority on the chase or authority on grammar for that meaning, guys. I'm still learning. I've been spending over 2 years now, just focusing on grammar, which is in those 166 words. And I'm telling you, I'm still learning things. It's absolutely amazing. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. You guys are pretty much talking among yourselves. See another one from Anon. Forrest Fenn answered by whose rules? Doesn't that mean that he follows his own rules with capitalization? Sure, you could look at that at Anon, but for me, I look at that again. I think he's just having a bit of fun with that Chicago Dave guy. Here's a guy who he himself in his own name is not following, the rules of punctuation and even grammar. So whose rules am I supposed to follow, Chicago Dave? Your rules or the actual rules that are part of the English language? So I think there's a little bit of play there. And who knows, is Chicago Dave a real person, or is this a fabricated, question by Forrest Fenn that he's trying to point something out to us? I mean, who knows? I mean, who knows how many private emails Forrest Fenn has gotten about the word brown? I mean, golly. Why, excuse me, Mr. Fenn, why did you capitalize it? Well, think for yourself, don't quit asking me all kinds of questions. Think for yourself. Hey, Bill Gorman, how are you, buddy? Zozo Rocks, see you in there. Mark Nodine, how are you? Some new people. The Chosen One, how are you? Are you really the Chosen One? Wasn't there a movie with Eddie Murphy in there one time? What was that movie? Anybody remember that? Eddie Murphy, I love that movie. Not seeing any other questions in here. So hopefully I kind of went over, why I believe, brown is capitalized. I don't believe it to be anything about brown trout. I was kind of, hinting to call, Wednesday's show about why are we so wrapped around brown trout? Why are we so wrapped around fish? What's this whole fascination with brown trout? And I'm not saying everybody is, but it seems to be. I think Mike Davis calls it a lot like that low-hanging fruit. It seems like that's the easy thing to grasp at. And why is that? Well, because in this book, he talks so much about, fishing, and there's so many references to it. And there's one other thing I wanted you guys to turn to too. And this is one thing that's kind of interesting. And I meant to hit on this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit here, but I want to talk about something that's in the book. So turn to page 29 in your book really quick. And this is going to be the chapter of Bessie and me. But I want to point something out to you that I'm surprised, and I haven't seen it in here, that somebody else hasn't pointed out. Now, this is going to be really interesting. This is where people are going to go, aha, it's brown trout, I told you. But let me explain this one to you. Now, he starts off right here in the very beginning. He says, my father got a Guernsey calf that grew up to a beautiful fawn-colored animal. We called her Bessie. Now, that Guernsey calf, again, capitalized with the capital G, Guernsey, not at the beginning of a sentence. And in the middle, why is that capitalized? Let me talk about that. But then he said we called her Bessie. Now, once he gave her a name, he could capitalize that. That calf is also always now known as Bessie. She now becomes a proper noun because, she's named, and we capitalize that. Pretty common, right? But why do we have it as a Guernsey calf? Okay, very simple answer to that. Well, those types of calves is a specific type of calf that comes from a Guernsey island out in the Channel Islands out near England. Very specific place. And I can pop up my screen here really quick. Let's see if I can do this for you. And this is what I don't like, is this gets in my way. Okay. So if we go to Guernsey calf, and you guys can see this here, it says Guernsey cattle. And even here it says the Guernsey is a breed of dairy cattle from the island of Guernsey. So it is a specific, very specific, unique island named Guernsey. So that calf now takes on the name of Guernsey calf. And that is why it is a capital G. This is no different than if you look at the, get this out of the way. A Siamese cat, right? A Siamese cat comes from an island, from the island Thailand, which used to be known as Siam, hence the Siamese cat. Okay, so it's capitalized because that is where it came from. It's related back to its heritage. This is no different than, give me one second. A Bengal tiger. A Bengal tiger originates from Bangladesh. This is no different than a Siberian tiger. Siberian tiger from the Siberian region. This is no different than like a German shepherd. All of those binomial nomenclatures of those animals, the first one is capitalized because it's referring from a very specific place that animal came from. Now, brown trout, while we know it originated from Europe and was slowly brought over to the United States, it is brown trout. It's not referring to its heritage or where it came from. It's referring to its color or whatever else, but it's not capitalized for that specific reason because it is still a common noun. Now, some of these common nouns, or binomial nomenclatures of animals, can be capitalized because it does relate or link back to their specific heritage of where that animal came from. There's other things, and we could get into plant species and those types of things too. And that's way over my head, guys. Maybe there's a botanist in here that could explain it. But sorry, I just wanted to go over that really quick and kind of clear that one up a little bit more. I meant to do that earlier and I kind of skipped around, so I do apologize for that. Just saying hi to a couple more people in here. Rob Matson, how are you? You guys are chatting amongst yourself really good. Oh yeah, The Chosen One. Thank you. Right. It was The Golden Child, not The Chosen One. Touche, you got me. Yeah, that's right. But it was a great movie. I love that movie. Yeah, exactly, William. The book is subjective to brown trout with all the pictures. Yeah, it's us. It's our own biases and beliefs that to brown trout. I don't even know. Does he even? I don't even think he even says brown trout specifically in here. I mean, I could be wrong. He mentions brown in other ways. He talks about brown bag, brown gravy, brown iron stain on his butt. They browned the toast in the oven. I think there was a couple other references, but none of them are capitalized, right? I mean, it's brown in itself as a color is not capitalized, and most colors other than like Van Dyke and maybe a couple other shades of brown. I could pull out my $17 square inch book on page 73. You could reference that, and he talks about that. But it was him, Forrest quoting Eric Sloan, I believe. So anyway, guys, I think I've talked enough about why I believe brown in the poem is not referencing brown trout. Again, I think it's a proper noun. That's why it's capitalized, and it is talking about a very specific noun. Okay, and that's why it's capitalized. And going into that can be a completely different show why or what we think brown is. But again, if you don't know where warm waters halt, you might as well stay home and play canasta, right? I got one here from Misha. It's not, I don't know why it's not highlighted, but I just saw it here at the end. Do you think put in below the home or brown is a clue referencing to the first or second clue? Out of order a little. Does he, like he does in the book? Does that make sense? Um, Misha, I'm what I call a nine clues is equals nine sentences searcher. And what I mean by that is I think that each sentence, and there are nine in the poem, is its own individual clue. Um, I think a lot of people don't agree with that. I think a lot of people, look at individual lines or individual keywords or phrases as being the clues. But as a nine sentences, nine clues guy, if Forrest Fenn is telling us the first clue is begin at where warm waters halt, I don't see that as the whole clue. I see the whole clue as that entire sentence. Begin at where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk. I see that as one single individual clue. Then I see the second clue as put in below the home or brown. So I see those as two separate clues. And I think you were saying, do you think put in below the home or brown is a clue referencing the first or second clue? I think they're two separate clues. Maybe I don't really understand your whole question there. Maybe if you want to rephrase it, and if I can find it, I'll try and re-answer it. RC, brown trout in my tummy, no capitalization. Yep, I like trout. It's good food. Zozo Rocks. First stanza directs us where to look for clue number one. Zozo Rocks, there's a lot of people that believe like you do. And who's to say that that is right or wrong? I don't know. But if you go back to, we did the round table on the first stanza, if we believe the first clue, and we ought to believe, and Forrest, the architect, telling us it is, if we believe the first clue is begin at where warm waters halt, then what is the first stanza? Is that a clue? Is it just something that we can overlook? I think a lot of people like you believe, Zozo Rocks, that believes that the first stanza is hinting us to the correct geographical location that your interpretation of what warm waters halt is resides within. Who knows? I personally don't believe that. I look at it a little bit differently, but who knows? I see one from Marty McBride here. If you showed the poem to 100 English teachers, how many would say there are nine senses? Well, yeah, of course, all of them would. And I'm sure we've got to have some people that are English teachers in this hunt that are looking at this thing. So who knows? I mean, I would think that they would be on it too. Minotaur, I completely agree with you that Brown is a proper noun. I think it is a nickname. Let's all imagine what Mr. Fenn would look like, or what Mr. Fenn could name something Brown. Sure, I mean, yeah, it could be a nickname as well. If you look at, again, I tell people to do your own research. There is several different examples of what a proper noun is. The most of them is a very specific or unique thing. So a unique thing could be the nickname. Just like I said, we named, our kids could have named that brown trout Brownie. We gave him a nickname. That's now his name, and henceforth and forevermore it becomes a proper noun, right? Finding the chest. I sent you an email. Yeah, I did get your email. I will respond to you about that. One cannot decipher anything if he or she won't follow first. I screwed up. I thought the chest was in the first stanza. Okay, guys, I'm gonna move on to the second topic now, and that second topic I really want to talk about, secondhand information, and this last couple of weeks, we did talk a lot about some secondhand information, and it obviously everybody knows it got pretty heated, but let's just talk a little bit about that. Now, let's talk about the two different types of very specific secondhand information that we got that caused a lot of heated information this week. Now, the first, and there is a real difference in these two. Now, the first that we got was, K-Pro telling me what Toby had told her. Now that information that we had gotten, it was secondhand information. It was a conversation between Toby and K-Pro. Now that secondhand information had no bearing or no relevance on anybody's ability to find the treasure chest. We can all agree upon that. That had no bearing on topics of helping anyone to find this treasure chest. That was blatantly obvious. We all know that, right? And so there was no real, it really provided nobody any kind of insight on how to find this, right? And it was open to have those people, those parties involved, to be able to provide rebuttals, be able to provide some kind of clarification of those. But we didn't get any. We still haven't got any real clarification on that. Okay, it's just out there, and those people have the ability to do that. Forrest Fenn is completely different. Okay, now the second information or secondhand information we got that was very heavily debated on Wednesday was the fact of if you tip your toe in it, right? That whole thing that we got from a conversation apparently between David Kramer and another searcher. And it was secondhand information about a searcher had a conversation with Forrest Fenn, and Forrest Fenn had said something about, well, did you tip your toe in the water? And then that somehow turned into, Warm Waters Halt being a geothermal feature. Now, that information does have relevance in our ability to obviously try and find this treasure, right? I mean, I think everybody would agree with on that. Two different things, one that has no bearing on our ability to find the treasure and one that does, right? Perfectly clear. So yes, while we know Forrest Fenn may not give us any clarification on that private conversation, that conversation about potentially Warm Waters Halt being a geothermal feature is something that we need to consider and we need to look at. And that's where you really have to consider the source of the information. You have to consider the context of the information. And you have to really look for some kind of clarification, some kind of rebuttal or clarification, because you can't just go off of that secondhand information on that, because to me it is still rumor, innuendo, and hearsay. Okay, even the other one is, but it has no bearing on our ability to find the treasure. This actually does. So you can't just go out there and say, oh my God, it has to be a geothermal feature, because we don't have the whole entire context of that conversation. We don't have any of that. We have no clarification. We weren't there. We weren't a fly on the wall. We don't have that. Even the person who had that initial conversation with Forrest Fenn, obviously, we're assuming, I guess, didn't record that conversation, didn't scribe it down, write it down. So even, many people in the chat room were talking about, the telephone game. And that's a very good example. And everybody knows this. You get in a line and one person tells a short story. And by the time it goes 4 or 5 people, even 10 people deep, it's a completely different story. And even within 2 or 3 people, that story is completely changed, because even though you were told directly from that one person, you don't intentionally embellish, you don't intentionally forget or leave things out. You just do it because you're trying to recite something that you just heard. So the further that information gets from the source, it changes. And if you weren't there, you don't understand the context of it. So it's not intentionally misleading. I don't think anybody's trying to intentionally mislead you. Okay, but it's unfortunate, and it does mislead if you weren't there to have that very specific conversation. And that stuff is very important, because it does have bearing on our ability, all of our ability to find this treasure. So you have to be really careful with all this secondhand hearsay information. And that's why, I personally try and focus just on the poem. Sure, it's fun to talk about all this other stuff and do all these other things, but it's you know, when you start getting into all these things, the further you get away from the poem. It's no different than this telephone game. The further you get away from the poem and you start looking into historical references, or you allow your personal biases to make you believe that you think this is a subtle hint, it's just like that telephone game. You're getting further away from the core evidence, or that, you know, conversation with Fenn. You get away from that, and things just completely change altogether. I hope that makes sense. I mean, kind of rambling on this, but I want people to understand that. And that's why, you know, I think it was, might have been a couple weeks ago, I talked about, you know, the difference and the importance between, you know, the written word and the spoken word. Because the spoken word, it's no different than I'm talking about. And I've got some notes right here in front of me to keep me, you know, on track. And I have these things that are just kind of highlighted notes that help me out. But I'm kind of just speaking off the cuff. You know, I'm just kind of, I like to say rambling or whatever, but I'm kind of speaking off the cuff to you all. And I can kind of change my train of thought as I go. But the written word, when you write something down, is very specific, and it's very very detailed. You know, it's like writing down the directions to get from here to a specific place. You have to write it down very detailed. Am I still in the other mode? Have I not gotten out? Looking over at my screen here. But so, you know, Forrest Fenn, like he said, he wrote that poem, and he was very specific about it. You know, he felt like an architect writing that thing. And there was some very poignant words out of The Thrill of the Chase that he talked about. And I've got a copy of this book right here, and I can never pronounce it right, but it's the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And I know I'm totally butchering that up, folks, but I'm going to read what's directly out of The Thrill of the Chase. And it says, "The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it." And to me, what that means is that those words are written in stone, and they're written in a book. They cannot be changed. They cannot, no matter what we do, no matter all of our, you know, trying to mess with the poem and change it, it's written in stone. It's there for us all to see. We cannot change it. And all this spoken word, this secondhand information that's being passed down is changing and morphing as we go. And the further or the longer it goes, the more it changes, and the more it just blows up into something that it shouldn't be. You know, the whole brown trout thing, where it was never him saying, it has nothing to do with brown trout. It was just a head nod. And all of a sudden it becomes in this big thing that it has nothing to do with brown trout. Now, I believe that's true, but people are basing that not on true facts that are in the poem. They're basing that on hearsay and rumor and innuendo. It's no different, in my opinion, with this whole thing about it not being a geothermal feature. Stick with the words in the poem. Stick with the book. Those are the things that are written, and none of our piety, our wit, or our tears can wash them away. You cannot change that. Everything else is just constantly fluid and changing. But this book, you know, it's in its, what, 9th or 10th print. It hasn't changed. You know, the only thing that's really changed that I know of in it is that Forrest Fenn's phone number is no longer in it. That was in the first edition. Everything else is the same, right? I think we can all agree upon that. Golly, I know I kind of rambled on that for a little bit. So I'm going back to the chat room here, kind of going over this. Hey, David, I see you in there. David Paisano, see you in there. Not seeing a whole lot of questions. I see one here from Justin Minotaur Marino. What does both David and DeCall have to gain from them separately hearing if you can dip your toe in the warm waters if you don't have it right? Well, I would allow both David and DeCall to clarify that. Again, I wasn't privy to that conversation, so I don't know all the facts in that conversation of what took place. Again, I was getting it third hand, and even when I got that, I mean, to me, and I told David, I said, David, this doesn't change our interpretation of the poem. It doesn't change anything in our solve. But I understand David's, uh, concern about putting that out to the community, and I agree with him on that. But again, I've got to give it that caveat that, again, to me, this is, second and potentially even third hand information. That stuff can change. We don't completely understand that context. That person that was sitting in that room with Forrest may not remember that conversation exactly. I mean, how many of us can remember conversations that we've had, weeks ago? And I know, maybe some of those conversations weren't as important as trying to find a multi-million-dollar treasure out in the woods. But again, how many of us can remember the exact conversation? That game of telephone, it changes, and that story will change. But if it's in a book, and it's in writing and it's in print, it's not changing. That poem is not changing. Nothing about it is. That is the pure evidence that we have. Just looking at your guys' chat here, see if I can pick up anything. Yeah, 23 Monarcha. If the searcher does not know where to start, he or she will not know where to end. Yeah, again, if you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there, you know. Uh, if you aim at nothing, you will hit your mark every time. That's another one. Yeah, Minotaur Marino. Again, I believe David Kramer, is putting out that information with a good conscience. I would agree with that. But again, it's just that caveat that we have to look at that information, as objectively as we can. We personally weren't there. It's second, third hand information now. He's my search partner. He's a reliable source to me. I think KPRO is somewhat of a reliable source, but again, it's just their ability to retain that information and remember exactly how it was said and the context that it was said in. Again, a head nod, or what Forrest Fenn said, if you tipped your toe in the water, was it warm? How does that, automatically construe to it being, not, or is warm water salt? That information will change over time. And again, for me, again, I don't care what warm water's halt is. I only care where it is. And I don't care even if it is, for a fact, a geothermal feature. There's so many of those, within the entire Rocky Mountains. How do you pick that singular correct one out of the many? Again, many could be any from 5 or 6 all the way up to a bazillion. Many is a non, it's not quantifiable. You cannot quantify it. So again, even if you knew what warm water's halt is, I don't think it's going to help you out that much. And again, if you know where warm water's halt, then what warm water's halt is may become more apparent and actually possibly even less important. Just something to think about. Mm. Yeah, David, I remember her number one roundtable. It was kind of her referring to that. I get you. But again, I think that she may be making a mistake there. RC, yeah, no phone line. That's not me. I do my own thing. I don't follow other people. She only dictates when I take the trash out. That's all she does, guys. Guys, I still consider K-Pro, somewhat of a friend, through all this. This whole thing has not been anything, for me to throw anything towards K-Pro. This is it's been different, for me. I'm past all that. So I don't have a problem with Mike Cowlings or K-Pro or anybody. You know what? I put that stuff out there for people to make up their own decisions. Mm. Faith Hunter, can't we all agree that info has been shared throughout the grapevine and take it with a grain of salt, believe it or not? Yeah, it's true. Again, there's been a very few, a very, not many people have really had the opportunity of sitting down one-on-one with Forrest Fenn, whether that be at his home or at a coffee shop or anything like that. And it's hard to believe that, people haven't asked him, you know, uh, certain questions, and then he's answered certain things. It's hard, but those, obviously no one's found the treasure yet. None of that information has ever helped him out. Forrest Fenn has always said he's never going to give anybody hints or clues that are going to help him get closer to the treasure chest. I mean, he's told people, sure, somebody, ask me for a clue, I feel obligated to give them something, right? So he tells somebody, hey, the treasure chest is located more than 300 miles west of Toledo. Or a person said, I found your treasure chest. I'm sitting here looking at it now. And he says, well, I just wanted to ask you, did the hot water affect its patina? And the person hung up. They thought they got a clue. Again, people will always see and interpret what they want. Again, it's that confirmation bias. I keep telling you guys that confirmation bias is a tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmations of pre-existing beliefs. If somebody already had the preconceived belief that, warm water's halt had to be a geothermal feature, and then Forrest Fenn says, did you tip your toe in it and was it warm? Oh my God, they're going to run off and look at every geothermal feature in the Rocky Mountains. Good luck. Again, knowing what warm water's halt is probably is not going to help you out that much. Knowing where warm water's halt is will help you out a lot, in my opinion. It's just a difference. Yeah, Susie's a lot of fun, Bill. I may not agree. There's a lot of people I don't agree with, that put videos out, and there's a lot of people that don't agree with my videos. That's fine. We're none of us are going to agree with one another. Again, it's obvious that David and I don't agree on everything. But that's what makes David and I a great search team, is that we can debate with one another, about certain things. And then we test things out and we come back and go, oh, that didn't work, and then we go back to the drawing board and we try something else out, but we don't agree on everything. I would not want a search partner that agreed with everything, because then we'd probably be lost the complete entire time. we we would just be going down one single rabbit hole and not testing everything else out. I mean, you want somebody that you can disagree with. I mean, I've said this before, I think in my 6 questions. We all tend to live in these, cozy, comfortable bubbles of like-minded people. In this last, I'm going to go on a political thing here, but this last election, between Hillary and Trump, really polarized, our nation. And I'm sure a lot of you, even on your Facebook, you know, uh, groups or your Facebook friends and stuff. I mean, you even had Facebook friends that you probably lost because they were not able to see the flip side of another person's argument. They weren't able to rationalize or have a debate with somebody that have a disagreement of opinion, and then find common ground and understand where that person is coming from and see that their side of their opinion. It's good in having a search partner that you're not always going to agree with, because then you can challenge each other. And by challenge, I mean get the other person to think, and to challenge their way of thinking. And then you kind of sit back and go, okay, well, yeah, that may not make sense, but let's explore this together. And that's why David and I think make a great team. Yeah, we both are, very strong, personalities, but we work well together in that sense. So trying to find some questions here, guys, if I can believe anything. Marty Bird, yeah, you say mountains north of Santa Fe plus 9 clues in the poem. It's interesting you say that because in that one uh, question, what was with Phil Bayman, when Phil Bayman asked, if all I had were, somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe and, begin at where warm waters halt, could I find the correct starting point or something along that lines? And Forrest Fenn responded, no, if all you had to go on were those 2 clues. It's almost like, Forrest Fenn is admitting that mention of somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe is actually one of those subtle clues that is sprinkled throughout the stories. It's almost like he's kind of admitting that in a sense. But to me, as a poem purist, I really didn't need the information of somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe to come up with, my interpretation of where warm waters halt. So while that, in the mountains north of Santa Fe was helpful, it wasn't necessarily required. Again, the definition, Forrest Fenn's definition of what a clue and what a hint does for us. In his words, a clue will point you towards the treasure, and a hint will only help you out with a clue. So again, it's trying to find out what those subtle clues are, scattered throughout the book, but then trying to understand how, if you even find one, how it actually helps you. So I look at that and I go, was Forrest Fenn really confirming that somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe was one of those subtle clues? Because it kind of does help you, but it's not really required. Just kind of how I look at this thing and think, guys. Aaron Ransby, Sean, there was a scrapbook or post somewhere about the importance of dipping a toe in the water before jumping in. Yeah, that was, I do recall that. I think he was talking about his business dealings where he kind of, because he had no experience, he was always just kind of jumping in with both feet, and working things out. And he kind of learned, over time to do that a little bit differently. So I think that's what you're referring to. I can't, I'm sure somebody could look it up on Terry Scant and find that out. I want to say that was, from the 6 questions in 2017 or something like that. But yeah, it might have even been in a scrapbook, but I do recall that, Aaron. Minotaur, I personally don't care if Mr. Finn gives hints and feel this is survival of the fittest. Do you care if Mr. Finn would give a behind the scenes hint? Yeah, Minotaur, I mean, this is Justin, this is his game. Forrest Fenn can do whatever he wants in this. If he finds somebody that he really likes and just decides, like I said in Wednesday's, video that, I just want to end this thing, and he just tells somebody this is where it's at, go get it. How many of you honestly would just say screw it and go get it? And I know my wife is the one who really brought up this whole thing, and she would probably beat me over the head with a rolling pin if I told everybody what Forrest Fenn told me and didn't go get it myself. But again, for me, this has always been about the thrill of the chase. That again, I didn't get to experience with my father of finding that little time capsule that he put up as a kid. And you'll understand that if you go watch my first video that I ever put out. And that's why I'm in this, because I feel it's again, I'm reliving that, what I got to, I didn't get to enjoy with my father. So this whole experience is kind of like that. Sure, the money would be great for our family. Absolutely, nobody can deny that. But to me, it's not about the monetary wealth of that treasure. It's about matching wits with force. It's about, doing something that I never got to do with my father. So that's what this is about, for me. But I mean, how many of you would really, share that information? I would think probably a lot of you may, and the other half may not. I mean, I don't know. But again, yeah, it's Forrest Fenn's game. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to give somebody a hint, who are we to say that that's unfair? He's the game master. Really. I mean, if Shiloh knew where the treasure chest was, right, and he decided to tell his buddy, okay, well maybe that might be unfair, right? I mean, I don't know. Faith Hunter, the question isn't if David is telling the truth about what he was told. The question is if the source is reliable or purposely leading others astray. Yeah, Faith Hunter, and I think I've always thought that you were a female. I could be completely wrong in that, and maybe you can correct me, but I think that's kind of what I was alluding to the other day. And some people took my words. I can't say out of context, but they're not really understanding my words. Is that everybody in this chat room? We're all competitors in this. Anybody could be misleading. That's why I've always said I don't want to give the answers to my clues. It's not because I'm afraid that you're going to go find the treasure and you're going to take it away from me or anything. I can't prove that I'm right. And if I put information out there and for some reason you think I'm an authority on the chase and you go out there and it's not there, you're going to blame me because you thought I was the authority on the chase and I'm misleading you. I've always said that there's too much noise out there, that we just need to focus on the poem. So why would I put out more information that potentially could be misleading? I'm not intentionally misleading you. I just can't prove that it's factual or true. I want you guys to think for yourselves. Go back and fact check me. Go back and look up proper nouns. Understand, the difference between a common and a proper noun. Look up, what a noun is. Look up when you capitalize. I want you to look up these things for yourselves. I don't want you to just take my word for them. I'm just trying to get you to think, just like I think Forrest Fenn is trying to do with us all. And I'm learning a lot, guys. And if I can, give back to everybody else and we're all thinking together, great. And maybe somebody can find this thing. Again, if I am right, I still want to be the person to find it. I mean, Dave and I want to be, we've got family and things that we know that this money could be good for, that's not my main purpose for this, but again, it is a great benefit of it, obviously. So yeah, you have to look at the reliability of that source. And again, we're all competitors, and I think, I honestly believe that K-Pro and Mike and Toby and Shelly, they're all great people. They're all good people. I don't think that they're nefarious in any way. And again, but perception is 9/10 of reality, folks. And it's hard to deal with some things. David Pisano, I trust in Forrest Fenn. Who are we to judge what he says or does not say to anyone? Forrest created the chase, the warm water, salt, the blaze, the homo brown. Who are we to question him? Yeah, exactly. Again, the moving finger has writ, and having writ, none of our piety, wit, tears, or anything can erase anything in this book, and specifically that poem. We just have to go back to that. Again, I think it was probably Toby that said it first. What would we have done if Forrest Fenn had died October 26, 2010? We would not have anything but the Thrill of the Chase book to go on. And I think that that's the box. That is what we should be staying in. Everything outside of that is just noise that can mislead you and could be subject to our own, biases and interpretations. And again, the poem is no different than that. There's a million different interpretations of just the words in the poem. But you got to have a foundation for it. Hey, totally not Mitzi. That's the first time I think I've seen you in here. I haven't seen what my wife is talking about in there, but I see you're talking with Justin. Be careful with Justin. Seeing a bunch of emojis in here. Is it 11:11, Bill? I missed that one. No, not 11:11 yet. My cat is only up. Hey, Gelly Kelkin, you're in there. What's up, Eugene? Good to see you in here. I just saw we have 100 people. Why are you guys up so late? You can watch this on replay, right? You got Fenn on the brain. You had to jump in here on Fennsomnia. Okay. See one here from Minotaur. What is your opinion about Mr. Fenn only giving really good hints, seemingly to people out of the country and in New Mexico? I don't have an opinion on that, Justin. I have not, you know, seeing that I can't quantify that. No way to, can't even give you an opinion on that one, buddy. Again, it's his game. He can do whatever he wants. Um, I'm looking in here. Aaron, I know I'm going to mess up your last name. Hurley. I know I'm totally butchering that. Sorry, that's a new name. I haven't seen you in here. How are you? There's a lot of side chat going in here. That's great. Aaron Ramsey, it's so fun, so frustrating, so enlightening. Good on Forrest for giving us all the gift. Up to each of us to receive it how we can, hopefully positively. Yeah, good point, Aaron. Again, it's only going to be one person or one search group that's going to find this treasure. So why? And I think DeCall has said this many times. I mean, why are we in this thing? What are we? I mean, we all just in it to find the treasure. We all have to honestly understand that it's only going to be one person to find this. So what else are you learning from this? What else are you gaining from this? I mean, it's a huge social experiment, and we've seen, the goods and the bads of that. But what are you learning from this? I can tell you what some of the things that I have learned is, man, just really just delving so much in the grammar. I've learned so much more about word meanings and understanding punctuation and grammar that I never would have understood before. And it's funny, I've watched, there's been a lot of specific people that I like to follow because I think that they say a lot of intelligent things, but I've watched even their writing in the forums, that these are people I think are paying attention to the grammar and punctuation and those things too, because I've seen their writing style improve over the last 2 or 3 years. And it's kind of interesting, that you see that. So I see that people are their writing is improving. I think their communication is improving and sometimes not improving. We all can work on that. But yeah, I mean, there's what if only one person is going to find this? What are you in it for? What else are you trying to learn? Is it just the adventure in it? Is it just that, you're reliving that Goonies, that Indiana Jones, that national treasure? What is it you're gaining from this other than just getting out in the Rocky Mountains and having fun with your family? There's something else that we all should try and gain and learn from this. I think, and we're all learning a lot about history. We're learning about things that we don't know. And I had a conversation with Why Must I Go on mysterious writings about that, wow, it's fun going down a lot of these rabbit holes in history and places that we learned about. A lot of times I know that the information I'm learning is not going to help me find this treasure chest, but it's still fun because then I go out and I have conversations with people that I work with, that it's like they look at me and they're like, how do you know that? you know, I'm just taking the time to research this stuff and understand I find it interesting. I mean, 30, 35, yeah, I don't know how old I am, but when I was in, elementary school, I hated history. I mean, it's my worst subject. I hated English, those things I hate. A lot of people now, oh, I don't want a grammar lesson. I want an English lesson because I hated it in school. I agree, but we're talking about a multi-million-dollar treasure here. Wouldn't you give grammar and English a chance, if it could help you? But those things back then I hated, and now I love them because I'm just learning so much. Sorry guys, I went off on a tangent there. One from RC. Do you think at this point in time that it's the Mrs. Dodson's opinion? What? Hey, where's oh, just kidding. She's not going to tell you anything. I can tell you that right now. I really didn't understand what you were saying there, RC, but yeah, she's not going to tell you anything. Mm, Fennsomnia, right? None of us can sleep. We got Fenn on the brain. Yeah, I just want to let everybody know too. I was going to say it at the end of this, but hopefully I don't forget it. What's on my mind? Next week, Wednesday is obviously Halloween. October 31st. So we won't be doing any show on Wednesday because of that. We take the kids out. We do like a trunk or treat at one of the local churches and stuff. So we go to that, and then we go see the grandparents and stuff like that. So we will not be doing a show on Wednesday, just so everybody knows. So the next show we'll do will be Fennsomnia next week, guys. And I'll put out a notification for that so you guys can click the reminder, the little bell icon if you want. What did you just buy, Mrs. Dodson? You just sold my search state. Is that what it is? Well, if you get enough to pay the house off, that's great. Hmm. Well, guys, we've been here a little over an hour. I didn't plan on having any guests tonight. I just wanted to, kind of touch on, some of the things that were brought up here in the last couple of shows as far as, why, I believe Brown is capitalized. And then also a lot of the kind of the secondhand information. There was a lot of stuff that came from Sasha that was good about the 200 footer, and then the stuff about, potentially being a thermal feature, and then Brown not being brown trout. So I really kind of wanted to go over those things. So I think, we covered, my opinion of why Brown is capitalized and why I don't believe it has anything to do with brown trout. Doesn't mean I'm right. I'm just looking at it from a grammar perspective. Again, if you don't believe that grammar has nothing to do with it and it's something else, hey, that's great too. We'd love to hear your interpretations, and we'd love to see that. I think we kind of covered the toe in the water thing. Again, I wasn't privy to that direct conversation, so it's really hard for me to really go in detail on that. Again, I just look at again, as rumor, hearsay, and innuendo. It's not known as fact because we weren't there and understanding the whole context of that conversation. That's my opinion, and I just try and block out some of that stuff, and just try and focus on the poem and that pure evidence. One other thing I forgot to talk about, and I've got a note here, and there was one thing that was also brought up, and I've heard people talking about it in the forums, is that, there's no hints in the illustrations or in the drawings. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, Forrest Fenn told us that for fact. I've looked everywhere I can find. I've never seen any kind of, words from Forrest saying that there are no hints or clues in the drawings. I've never heard Forrest Fenn or heard him say that. Now, there was one thing that was over on Thor, and I'll see if I can find it and bring it up for you guys. Let's see if I can find it, and then I'll share my screen. Okay, let me share my screen with you really quick. I totally forgot about this, guys, and I apologize. So, and we were probably getting ready to close up here. But the only time I seen anything about that was and I'll highlight it here. This is something that came from K-Pro, and this was back in, looks like towards the end of July here. This was July 21st. And this is just prior to, because we were going to do the whole flip side conversation about the illustrations, the whole video that completely got lost and messed up, where we had a good friend, Jeremy Parnell, on there with us, who was very, very good with, manipulating images and stuff like that. So it was key in having him in there. But K-Pro had stated this, but this is something that she was going to post on the Flip Side show, and I've got to highlight it, and everybody's probably already read it right now. But she said, talking about illustrations is fun, but for solving the poem, I think we, not all but some, are missing something that is key, and we need to get back in the box. I asked Forrest, and he agrees. So, and this is it's a little bit weird to me. Like, I don't necessarily understand her whole statement, but to me is K-Pro saying that, this is what she said to Forrest. Hey, Forrest, talking about illustrations is fun, But for solving the poem, I think, we're missing something. And if Forrest Fenn agrees, are we making that leap in logic then that there's no clues or hints in the illustrations? I think that's what's happening, because I haven't found anywhere, and please, if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me, in the chat, or send me an email, or put it in the comments. If you found something where Forrest Fenn is said directly that there's no clues or hints in the illustrations, because I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. But this is the only thing that I've ever really seen that might, somebody may be trying to make that leap in logic. And I think that you're making a huge assumption based on that leap in logic. Do I personally believe there's hints or clues in the illustrations? No. I think there's some interesting coincidences in the fact that last illustration in the epilogue does not match the story whatsoever. I think that's interesting, but I don't think that is, by fact, any kind of clue or hint that we should be focusing on. Could it be? Maybe. But I think, if this is what, people are believing, that K-Pro got some information saying the hints are, there's no hints or clues in the illustrations, I think you're making a huge leap in logic that is just way far out there, and you need to reel that in. I think that's, you got to reel that in my opinion, on that one. So sorry guys, I forgot to bring that one up. I wanted to talk about that one. So we did talk about, brown trout, why I don't think, that B stands for that. We did talk about, the toe in the water thing. And now I've obviously talked about the hints. And these are just some things that were really brought up, in the last couple of days. And so now I just again wanted to say we're doing no show Wednesday. Just wanted to let everybody know that we're not doing that because it is Halloween. I want to thank everybody that showed up tonight to come out for Fennsomnia. Hopefully you guys can get some sleep now. And also, if you don't know, I do have a Facebook page called The Flip Side of Forrest Fenn's Treasure Hunt. If you are not a member of that group, it is a closed group. You have to request to become part of that. I am the only moderator admin, so I will be the person that is approving or denying. I've never denied anybody. I wouldn't see why I would. I would kick somebody, and if somebody got a little too rude or something in there. I try and keep away from the political and the religious talk, so try and keep away from that. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And if you'd like, share it with a friend or something. So I just want to, again, thank you all for coming out late for a lot of you. I mean, for everybody really, and joining us on Fennsomnia. So again, no Wednesday show. So we will catch you guys on the flip side, Fennsomnia, next week at 10 p.m. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you. Bye. I gotta stop the share. Forgot to do that.